Hey everyone, this is Hiram Anderson. I'm a representative at Dental Plus USA. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Dental Plus Zirconia. We offer two different types of zirconia. We offer the Dental Plus Multi, which is really good for almost any kind of restoration that you want to do. And then we have the Dental Plus Harmony material, which is really great for 6-unit and unit bridges or smaller. So really it's more of a quadrant type dentistry material for restorations. So you have a little bit more translucency, a little less strength. It's more of an aesthetic type material for anterior region type restorations. Of course, you can also use it for posteriors and for bridges and stuff like that. Some of the unique characteristics of the Dental Plus Zirconia are it has the lowest wear on opposing teeth when comparing it to other major brands. I'm going to share a couple other characteristics as well, and most of these characteristics are created through the way that these zirconia discs are manufactured. And because of the way they're manufactured and the type of powder that's used in this manufacturing process gives us all these great characteristics and properties of the material. One of the other great things is that our zirconia has the highest translucency to strength ratio compared to most other brands on the market. You still get really great translucency, but you get higher strength at the same translucency level of other types of zirconia. One of the other things is that with our zirconia, you can sinter it ultra fast. Like with a single unit of zirconia, it can take a minimum of 23 minutes to sinter a single unit of our zirconia. Now your oven would have to have that capability to heat up that fast, but if it does, you can sinter a single unit of our zirconia in 23 minutes. So as many of you know, all zirconia is not the same. Some of you think, zirconia is zirconia, but really when it comes down to it, zirconia, depending on the disc and how it's manufactured and the different ingredients that are put in it and the sintering time that it has, many variables go into creating the characteristics and properties that each one of us like, and some of us like some characteristics more than others. And that's why there's so many different discs or types of zirconia, so you can get different properties, of course. And so today I want to talk a little bit about what differentiates the Dental Plus Zirconia from many other types of zirconia, why the characteristics that are in our disc, the Dental Plus multi-disc, are the way they are. So let's get into that a little bit. So one of the biggest reasons or the biggest differences between the Dental Plus Zirconia and other zirconia is the way that it's manufactured. So most zirconia is cold isostatically pressed or hot isostatically pressed, where basically you get a bunch of powder that these manufacturers, they buy either from companies that manufacture the powder and it has all the ingredients that they specifically want in it. And then they get this powder and then they combine it with some binders. And these binders are there to hold the powder together. And then they mix it all together and they put it in a big bag, and then they stick this in a press, in a hydraulic press, basically, where it has pressure from all sides pushing in on this material. And so the binders will hold all the powder together as it's pressed together and held in this state. And then they pull this material out of the press, and then they're able to finish it down from there and cut it into different size discs and whatnot. So this is called the dry compaction method. Basically, you get your dry powder and your binders, and you combine them, you press them all together with a lot of high pressure, and then you take them out and finish them down. So you have dry compaction compared to the colloidal processing method or the slip casting method. So slip casting and colloidal are kind of the same thing. It's just a different name for it. So we'll go forward calling it the colloidal method. But basically, you have your isostatically pressed material, which I just talked about. And then you have the colloidal method. And the colloidal method, if you go to, well, let's talk a little bit more about the dry compaction method. So basically you have the powders The downside of binders that are combined with these particles, or this powder that you get, this zirconia powder, when you pre-sinter these materials to create this chalk-like substance that the discs actually end up being like, you've got to, after it's compressed all together and cut into discs, and then they pre-sinter it in a sintering oven, all those binders that hold that powder together are all burned out. And so these burn out and they leave voids in the material. So the material is a little more porous. And it also, those binders are toxic. And so when they burn out, they just kind of go out into the atmosphere. But also these binders, like I said, they leave voids in the material. So it's more porous, and which can create some inaccuracies when you're sintering your zirconia, when you're doing that final sintering on them. And the reason for that is, when there's more voids, or there's more clumpy like particle sizes, bigger sizes, smaller sizes, where they're not all uniform particle size, then the material will be more liable to warp during sintering if it's not done very carefully with other techniques. And then it also creates, when you have voids, you also have less translucency, and you also have less strength. So when you don't have that uniform particle size with a uniform particle material, then that's kind of some of the downside to the isostatically pressed material. Now, a lot of people use this isostatically pressed processing because it's faster. They can create more discs in a shorter amount of time. And that's a big advantage to the manufacturers. But the manufacturer that we chose to use does this in the colloidal method, and the colloidal method makes it, you get better characteristics, but it takes much longer for the zirconia to be processed. And so it's not going to be a cheaper zirconia. It's of course a higher quality, higher priced material. But we love the characteristics and properties that we get from it. So the manufacturer, what they do is they buy the powders that they like with all the different ingredients that come with the powders. And then they take those powders and they put them in a grinding little container, basically, that has little sintered zirconia balls in it. And these little sintered zirconia balls mixed in with this powder will break down the powder even more. So it breaks it down from like a 50 micron size down to like a 300 micron size. Between 200 to 300 micron size. That's basically like the size of smoke particles, as far as the size of the actual particle when the powder's broken down that far. And the reason for that is to get many different great characteristics that we like in this zirconia discs. So once they take it through this tumbling method, where they dump the powder in with a bunch of smaller zirconia beads, basically, that are sintered, they break up the powder and pound it down even to really small particle size. So once they have this particle size, then they mix the particles and this powder that they've created with a specific kind of liquid, and they basically create this slurry, or like this zirconia slurry. It's basically a liquid. And then once they have all their ingredients mixed in with that, then they pour this zirconia that's super fine particle size with this liquid into molds. And they have a very specific way of how they pour this material so that it all blends very, very nicely and creates a very natural transition from a more dense chroma at the gingiva up to a really nice light incisal, like a natural tooth, so that you can get a beautiful disc that when you cut your crowns out of it, or your arches, they have a nice even transition from gingiva up to incisal with color saturation. And of course, that's why we call it the multi, because it's a multi-layer disc, giving you that multi-layer color and multi-incisal effect, and as well as a little bit more translucency as you go up into the incisal area. And so once you pour these into these molds, and when doing so, it creates a very homogeneous and dense green body compared to conventional methods of the dry compaction. So you get very homogeneous, dense particles all laid out. You don't have voids in between them. You don't have big particle sizes and small particle sizes and all that kind of stuff. You'll see a difference where you have a particle size on the right hand side that shows the dry compaction, and then one on the left side showing the colloidal. And with this, you kind of can see the difference between the homogeneous kind of laying of all the particles compared to the other one. It's basically irregular particle packing when you have the dry compaction compared to a more homogeneous particle packing with the colloidal side. Let's talk a little bit more about the particle size. I mean, does the particle size really matter that much? You know, when you have a dry compaction method, they just get the powder, they smash it all together with the binders and sinter it. So in that way you have irregular size particles, and then they're usually much bigger size particles. So basically what that does is it's not quite as good. So when you have a colloidal method where you break the particle size down and you have them all very similar in particle size, and then they all lay out homogeneously as they're poured and dried in these molds, when you have this homogeneous layer of, you know, all the particles laying out very, very uniformly, it's much better as far as crack propagation. So when you have a little tiny crack that starts, it's not going to travel very easily through those small particles, where when you have bigger size particles, the crack will much more easily travel and propagate through the material than it will with the smaller size particles. And then you have translucency. So with translucency, it's much easier for the light to go through a uniform, smaller particle sized material than it is to kind of go through something that has a bunch of irregular sized particles that also have voids in them from like the binders and stuff like that were left over from when it was sintered. And so you have basically that helps to create a stronger zirconia that has more translucency without adding more yttria to it. So typically when you add more yttria, you get more translucency, but you also get lower strength. And so with this method, you still get really great strength, but then you also get great translucency without adding extra yttria to it. And so you get the best of both worlds. You get great translucency and you get great strength. So that ratio between, say, the gingival side of the zirconia up to the incisal side is only 100 to 200 megapascal difference compared to many other types of zirconias that have a lot bigger ratio between those two. So let's talk a little bit about wear against opposing dentition or against other types of restorations. So we all know that zirconia is the hardest material as far as a restorative dental material. And it can be very abrasive and harsh against opposing restorations or natural dentition, depending on how it was finished and if it was ground on after it was cemented in the mouth, you know, many different things. If the lab and the doctor have done a good job as far as seating the crown and not grinding on it, without repolishing it or something like that, then you're going to have typically a pretty good result as far as wear goes on the opposing dentition. Like if you have a really smooth surface for the opposing to wear against, then it's typically going to be very good. But if it's been ground on and left rough, it's going to be super harsh to your opposing dentition. And that's with any zirconia. But if it's done correctly, the smaller particle size that we have in the Dental Plus multi-zirconia creates a very, very nice high shine. And it's easy to obtain a high shine from it because of that small particle size. And once you have that, it's a more smooth surface than any other material because of that really small particle size that it's been broken down to in the manufacturing process of the disc. So as long as you have it polished really well, it polishes actually easier than most zirconia. And you can actually polish it in the green state before it's even sintered to get a better result even. So when it comes out of the sintering oven, basically you don't even have to polish it further if you do it right in the green state, which makes it easier. Or if you do it after sintering, you can polish it there as well. So you'll notice here that in this slide, you can see the difference as far as the wear facet that was left. So we put our zirconia and then 3 other competitor zirconias, kind of major brands in the industry, and tried to see basically how much of a wear pattern it creates through the same amount of chewing cycles. With the Dental Plus Multi Zirconia, it created the smallest, least amount of wear on the opposing compared to all the other brands. They were all polished the same and put through the cycle all at the same time to be able to go through the exact amount of cycles. So it's just interesting to see the difference, but that's another really great advantage to this zirconia. Thank you so much for watching today and learning a little bit more about the Dental Plus Zirconia. If you'd like to contact us to learn more information or details about how to get it, go to dentalplususa.com, or you can contact me directly at Hyrum, Hyrum, at dentalplususa.com.